Wilishka Salt Mine, 1943 to 1944. Chapter 13. One morning at roll call, I was one of 50 prisoners pulled out of the ranks and loaded onto a truck. The Nazis didn't tell us where we were going. "They're taking us away to kill us," one of the men said. But that didn't make any sense. Amengoth had no problem killing any of us at Plazow. Why bother to load us into a truck and take us somewhere else to kill us? Just looking around at the others the Nazis had chosen, I could tell we were the strongest men at Plazow, or at least the furthest from becoming Muselmanners. I was sure we were being taken somewhere else to work, and I was sure it had to be better than Plazow. My 2 weeks saving my strength under the floor of my barrack had saved me. The truck pulled up outside a building with a tall spire like a bell tower, but this was no church. The place had an industrial look to it. Oil-covered motors and generators stood around it like sentinels, and train tracks led into it. The Nazi in charge of our truck unloaded us, and we joined another group of prisoners who'd been brought in from somewhere else. I ended up standing next to a man who looked familiar to me, but I couldn't place him. "Are you from Krakow?" I asked him. "No," he said, with surprising force. "I am no one." He was right, of course. I shouldn't have even asked. But I noticed 2 of the other men who came with me from Plazow looking at him more intently now. "First, we will take you into the mine to show you where you will be working," a capo told us. "Then you will be assigned to your barracks." We were marched into the factory, which wasn't a factory after all. It was the sheltered entrance to an enormous mine. In groups of 10 and 12, we boarded elevators. I got on with the familiar-looking man and the 2 prisoners from Plazow who'd been watching him. They stood close behind him now, uncomfortably close, but he didn't say anything. He just stared at the floor. The elevator ka-chunked, and down, down, down we went. Electric lights on the open elevator cage illuminated the gray-white walls of the mine shaft as we descended. Suddenly, I was reminded of being under the floorboards again in Plazow. I was squeezed in underground, trapped in the dark with death coming for me. "Salt," one of the others whispered. "The Wilishka salt mine. It has to be." My trance was broken. I reached out my hand to touch the wall and tasted my fingers. It was true. The walls were made of salt. The elevator car hit bottom, and we were guided through a labyrinth of tunnels and small chambers. "You'll be working room 47, our capo told us. Level 7. We marched down salt stairs. We crawled along salt floors. We passed stalagmites formed from salt water dripping off the ceiling. I'd never seen anything like it. The mine was like a strange dream world. Very soon, we left the electric lights behind and could see only as far ahead of us as our capo's carbide headlamp. "Maybe you're thinking it would be easy to slip away in the tunnels," our capo told us. "Maybe you're thinking it would be easy to escape into the darkness. There are 9 levels, 300 kilometers of tunnels. Maybe you are thinking we would never find you." The capo stopped and turned his headlamp on us. "You're right. We wouldn't find you. You would be lost forever in a maze blacker than night with nothing to eat but salt and nothing to drink but salt water. If I were you, I wouldn't get lost, either on purpose or by accident." We all followed closer behind him the rest of the way. The capo showed us the room where we would be working, the picks and shovels we would be using, the carts we would fill with them. The other prisoners who worked the mine were already back in their barracks asleep. We would get up with them before dawn and come right back here to work without a full night's sleep. Just the thought of it made my arms and legs ache. The capo took us out a different way, through a vast chamber where every footstep echoed. One of the men in front of me stumbled, and a piece of salt clattered off the wooden boardwalk beneath us and splashed. Water! There was an entire lake under here. It rippled and glimmered black in the night from the capo's lamp. Up more steps we went and another elevator until we came to another huge chamber, this one lit with electric light again. Here there was no lake, but something even more amazing. Statues. Dozens of figures, all carved out of salt. And the lights in the ceiling, they were chandeliers made out of salt. After so many months and years of dirty streets and peeling paint, of gray uniforms and Spartan barracks, it was astounding that there could still be beauty in the world, especially here, a mile underground. The workers, the miners, they did this, whispered the man who told me the name of the mine before. Some of these statues are 1,000 years old. There were trolls and serpents and gnomes. There were Polish knights and kings and queens. I wish they could somehow magically come to life and free us, save us. They stayed still, though, frozen in salt, as trapped and helpless as we were. The last room was another monument left by former miners in Waleshka's happier past. It was a temple, a chapel, no, an underground cathedral. There were more statues, an altar, a rail, everything a Catholic needed to hold services. But praying hadn't done the miners any good either. The Nazis owned almost all of Poland now, even 300 meters underground. Night had fallen and the stars were out when we got back topside. We were taken to our barracks, which were no better than our last at Plazau. Because we'd missed dinner, we were sent to bed without any food. We knew better than to complain, and most of us went to our beds as quickly as we could. Morning, as we all knew, would be there before any of us were ready for it. But the two men who'd been looking strangely at the man I thought was familiar cornered him once the capo was gone. "Your name is Holtzman, isn't it?" one of them said. "No," the familiar-looking man said. "No, my name is Finkelstein." "You were in Krakow, weren't you?" the other man said. "You were one of the Judenrat's policemen." Of course! That's why I remembered him. How could I have forgotten that face? He was the man who had brought the Nazis to my flat. The one who had stolen everything else from us while the Nazi took my mother's ring. I remembered my mother's eyes that day, the emptiness that had never completely gone away. I'd been so scared, so protective, that I hadn't even felt anger. I did now. "No," the policeman said. There was panic in his eyes. "My name is Finkelstein, from Zelonki." "Quiet in there," a capo's voice shouted from outside. The two men said nothing more to the policeman, but they watched him all the way back to their bunks. That night, I could hear the man crying softly in his bed until someone hissed at him to shut up. The morning was cold, with only lukewarm coffee-flavored water to fight off the chill. It was colder still underground, where it was always damp and the sun never shone. The low ceiling made us all walk like old crones, and I noticed that even when they could, some of the old-timers never stood up straight anymore. Their backs were permanently bent. I was given my own carbide light, my own pickaxe, and my own place to work. It was heavy work and boring. There was nothing to it but swinging my pickaxe again and again, breaking off big chunks of salt that another prisoner shoveled into a donkey cart. I chipped away, my arms already starting to ache from weakness and malnutrition, when I heard someone cry out from the chamber around the corner from mine. "What's this? How did this happen? Who's done this?" It was the voice of one of the capos. It wasn't said in the tone the capos used to taunt us or goad us into working harder. This was something different, something confused, something scared. The other capos heard it in his voice right away and ran around the corner to help. Without guards, we put down our picks and our shovels and hurried to peek around the corner behind them. It was the Judenrat policeman, Holtzman or Finkelstein or whatever his name was. His head had been smashed in with a shovel, and the rest of his body was gashed and torn and bleeding. In the carbide light from a dozen watching headlamps, something glittered and shone in his cuts. Salt. Someone had rubbed salt in all his wounds, like Abimelech, pronunciation, in the book of Judges, who sowed the fields of his own people with salt after he put down their rebellion. I remembered reading about him while studying the Torah with my father long before the war. This was punishment and purification all in one. "I said I want to know who did this," the capo yelled. I looked around from face to face, trying to see who had done it. The men who had accused him in the barracks weren't there. It could have been any of them. It could have been all of them. No one said anything, and I worried we would all be whipped for the crime. But the capo only shook his head. "What do I care if you kill one another? You'll all be dead soon enough anyhow. You, and you," he said, pointing to 2 of the prisoners watching nearby. "Drag his body out of here. Weight him down and dump him in the underground lake." No one said another word about him. The capos sent us back to our places, and I chipped away at the salt wall again until they told me to stop. That night, I dreamed the salt statues came to life and set on our captors with their swords, but every one of the statues had the face of the dead man.